I just want to say hello and welcome you to the Life with People podcast. I'm really glad you're here. If you don't know, this podcast is about finding, building, rebuilding, and reimagining community. My hope is that these conversations encourage you to reach for connection and community wherever you find yourself. This episode is the first in what will be a series of conversations around the topic of grief. The question I've been getting is, well, why grief? One, we're about to roll into the holidays, and people actually grieve lots of things around the holidays. There is a mix of joy and excitement, and then actually sadness and loss. And sometimes you're rolling into toward the end of the year and you just realize who isn't with you, or you realize what you wish had gone better. And there's like some grief and some loss. So that's one reason. Another reason is because I believe this topic is generally, though it's being talked about more and it's getting more awareness in general, our culture kind of ignores this topic. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I think part of it is because it feels hard, it's heavy, and it often requires something of us. It's not an easy thing to do. It's not natural for us. But the truth is, grief is a universal experience. Loss is a universal experience. And I think one of the reasons it's so uncomfortable is because it forces us to sit in our own losses as well. So all of this to say, I want to invite you to join me and to wade into the uncomfortable waters of grief, to learn how to sit with people in their losses and to walk alongside them in dark seasons. I think one of the most powerful ways that we can learn about this is to hear people's stories. So with this first episode, I talked with my friend Noelle Roberts to hear about her story of loss, how she faced a side of God she didn't recognize, and how she began to sift through the ashes and to learn to dream again. You're going to want to lean in for this one. All right. Welcome back to Life with People. I'm here with my friend Noelle, and we are going to do something a little bit different for the next few episodes. We are going to do a series on grief and how to grieve well or not well, or what has our experiences been grieving in the context of community and with people. Noelle is a good friend of mine. I'll just do a personal plug for her before we start. She has an awesome online Pilates studio, which is transferring to an app. So now that I've said it, she's got to do it. But she'll have an app for you to download. And it's a very reasonable price for a really great app. Yeah. Anyway, love it. Love it. She says, NoelleRobertsStudio.com. You can check it out. But Noelle is also a dear friend of mine who went through a really difficult difficult's the wrong word. The most horrific, life-altering event of any of my adult friendships. And I have had the privilege of watching her journey unfold and watching her walk through, which she would, I think, say the darkest season of her life thus far. And so I'm really grateful that, Noelle, that you are taking the time to have a conversation on the podcast and to let people into your journey a little bit. So I would love to pass the ball to you and let you share a little bit about where you are today and how you got to South Carolina.
Well,
Because that's part of it, right? That's part of your journey. Yeah.
Carolina is where I am today is directly cause and effect, right? It's like
Right.
it's all directly related to what I have lived through. So today, currently, I am living in South Carolina. I've got family close by, and I'm here with my son who just turned 8. And
Wild.
and yeah, it's very wild. And now we've actually been in South Carolina for 4 years, which is crazy. And we're still very much in like a rebuilding process of our lives, and figuring out what life looks like here, and really kind of orchestrating and crafting what we want our next years to look like, the next 5, the next 10, and so on. So it's still very much unfolding. There's a lot that's not figured out. And I think going into my 42nd year and feeling like things are not figured out, I think if you had told me that in my teens or like my early 20s, that I'd be in my 40s and not have things really figured out, that would have been terrifying. But I feel a lot more okay with it and at peace with it than I ever did before. So coming into a place where not knowing doesn't feel as big and scary and daunting as it once did. And it feels more like an invitation into opportunity. Like there could be so much on the horizon. And I think that's a huge testament to from where I was to where I am now, even though it's like, I don't have all the T's crossed and all the I's dotted. But do you want me to just like jump into what
Sure.
happened?
Sure. Can I make a comment before you do?
Yeah.
And then I, just as your friend, love hearing you describe it that way because before your big loss, one of the things I would take away from you or from Ramon, one of the surefire phrases I would take it into almost every first date is you can make this whatever you want it to be. Just the idea of we have so much opportunity. We're not backed into a corner. We have options. You have agency and power and you can make choices. And I love hearing you get back to that core of who you are. I want to reflect back to you. That is a huge testimony to how far you've come. You know what I mean? Because I feel
Yeah.
like sitting in the rubble of your dreams, it was like all of that hope, all of that even creative thinking was just gone.
Yeah.
And yeah. So anyway, yeah, go ahead and jump into take us to ground zero.
Yeah, sure. So ground zero, my husband and I met and married later in life. I was 31 and I was turning 32 that year and he was 40. So later start, but we were like so in sync. We're like right out the gate. Very similar as far as our values and that type of thing went, and just kind of our worldview.
Mhm.
And so we got married in 2015, and then in 2017 we had our son, and we were very much like on this trajectory of we're just at the beginning, right? We're just starting our family. There's going to be more kids, all these big plans. My husband was larger than life energy. Never met a stranger, like walked into a room and literally left with everybody being his best friend. He was just one of those people that, yeah, absolutely super charismatic and visionary in the truest sense of that word. Always walked in carrying vision, not just for himself and our family, but for everybody around him. And so, if you had a conversation, even if it were passing in a hallway, he would find something notable about you and be sure to call it out. And he would remember it if he saw you again. And so it was just this way of he went through life. Really, I mean, it sounds very cliche, but like really giving life to everybody that he came in contact with. So I would say it's like best years of my life, living with somebody like that and partnering with somebody like that. In 2019, in March of 2019, really normal day for us and having a very typical evening, have dinner. We'd had a really sweet day together, talking and discussing some of the things that were on the list for like some like hopes and dreams of where we wanted to be in the next 3 to 5 years. And that evening after dinner, he ended up collapsing, having a major heart attack, and passing away. So my life went from very normal, very steady, like best years of my life, to this complete alternate reality that I'm living in, where he was there and then he wasn't. And it was in moments, like literal moments, that it happened. And then my entire world just really turned upside down. And I found myself as a 35-year-old widow with a 19-month-old. I'd never known another woman that age, or a young widow, never had to ever personally walk somebody through that or what that could look like. And I know none of us ever imagine that our life is going to be that we're going to be that person. But literally did not think that was going to be something I'd have to walk through until I was in my 80s. It was not on the radar in any way, shape, or form. So my whole world literally changed, and I broke. I just broke. I mean, there's nothing to hold together at that point. Some people refer to it as out of order loss, right? Because my husband passed before his parents did. And so you have this very intense injustice in a way where it's like, this is not how life is supposed to go. And my worldview, my paradigm for living completely shattered because that scenario didn't fit inside it anymore. And it led me to a lot of, I think really, I would call them like the dark years to a lot of dark years, but I say dark years not in like gosh, how do I say that? I don't regret them. I don't regret the dark years because I had to let myself be there. I had to let myself fully submit to the process that I was in and fully walking through a grief process. And for me, that looked different than anybody else I'd ever known at that point. And what that looked like to really actually be able to, I hate using a phrase like come out on the other side, because there's no other side. Like this grief, I carry it for the rest of my life. It's a part of me. It's what's literally made me who I am today. I am not the same person I would be if my husband were still alive today. It's completely shaped me. And so that grief is something that it shows up every day. It shows up in ways that I don't expect it to. And it's not something where it's like I'm rocking in the corner crying anymore, but it is something that even looking into my future, the grief is still shading the edges of my future, right? It's like it's always a very present part of me. But I think going through that, I call it, it's weird, but it's like a submission into grief, right? Where you're like fully letting yourself feel and experience and just be in that process. I think is what has really helped me be able to almost like if you could metabolize it, right? Like if you could break it down and consume it and then metabolize the process of what you've gone through, the experience, because it's for me, it was too much. I couldn't process what I was walking through. And it took me years, therapy, friends, it took me a lot of, a lot of stuff to be able to be on the other side where it's like, okay, I'm a solo widowed mom raising a boy and having hope for what the future looks like. And so that is a miracle. And I would say it's also a part of just going through that process and not denying yourself the grief, if that makes sense.
Oh, it makes total sense. And I think just to reiterate, it's been almost 7 years, right? We were talking before we hit record. And I would say from the outside, those first 4 or 5 were dark. And I appreciate that you said you don't regret the darkness. And I think as your friend, it wasn't dark in a unhopeful or a like, we're going to stay in this pit forever way. It was dark in the like, I need to face this darkness or it will consume me. Right.
Yeah.
Like I remember sitting at a coffee shop with you sometime, and it was in that first year before you moved. And we sat there and you looked at me and you started talking about how you found C.S. Lewis's book, A Grief Observed. And I got that book wasn't even supposed to be published, I don't think. Like it was his journal or something. Um, but I remember you saying, Teresa, I finally feel like someone understands how dark grief is and how dark my life feels. And I just sat there going, oh, that hit me hard because I think people need permission to be like, this is very hard and very dark, and permission to stop their life. Because I know like lots of people you've told me before is like, all right, come on, let's go, move on. When are you getting remarried? When are you doing this? When are you doing all these things? And the reality is you have to make the choices that work for you and your family and where you're at in your process. And that process doesn't have a timetable. So yeah. Anyway, so I just want to highlight that embracing that season, I think was necessary, you know.
Yeah, and I think for me, being a person of faith and believing that there is a God and believing in Jesus Christ and this whole process, like there's such a worldview that comes with being raised and then choosing that faith model or that religion. And I would say that was probably the biggest part that snapped going through grief, because it's one of those things where nobody wants to tell you how bad it really is. Everybody's very quick to give you hope, right? To offer hope.
Right.
But nobody's very quick to sit with you and mourn. And for me, like what my heart and my soul needed was, I need you to mourn with me. People told me they were mad at how I did the funeral, and that because I didn't do a celebration of life and I did an actual funeral. For better or worse, I tend to be a pretty authentic person. And if I'm not feeling it, I'm not doing it. I was like, there's not a life to celebrate. His got cut so short. That was just the raw reality of what I was sitting in. And so I was like, I want people to mourn. Like we need to sit in the loss and experience the loss and the heaviness together, because that's where I was.
Mm-hmm.
And whether that was right or wrong, I don't really care, honestly. It was what I needed. And I think it was a part of unraveling for me, where it was realizing that um, those dark places, like God is not absent from those. Right. You know, one of the verses that I loved the most in that process was, there's a psalm where it says he hides himself in darkness, right? And it's this idea of, we may perceive something as dark or terrible or awful, but God does not. And there was just so much of that unraveling for me, especially in early grief, and coming across, you know, C.S. Lewis's work, and just giving permission that I wasn't losing my faith or having a crisis of faith or walking away from the Lord, because I was grappling with these darker themes that were, it was just my reality at that point. I literally felt like I was living in a daily nightmare. Like my sleep was my life and my awake was my nightmare. And so I think like hearing people mirror, when people could mirror back to me the reality and let me know it actually is as bad as you think it is. Like, you know, I think finding a friend in C.S. Lewis' journal, right? Because there was nothing, it was his personal journal after his wife died from an awful disease. And he was completely unfiltered. And I think in grief, it's like there's something very soothing about having a person reflect back completely unfiltered to you, because you don't get the luxury of filters after somebody is ripped from your life like that.
Right. And I guess along those lines, I know there were many times when you said things to me like, I've been on this journey with God for too long. I'm not going anywhere, but this is a whole side of him that I didn't even know existed. Like the dark side, if you will, like the part of him that allowed it, right? The part of him that sits in it, the part of him that does turn his face away from his son on the cross. I remember you saying like, this is a terrible side of God that I didn't know existed.
Yeah, I think
I
there
don't
are
know
a
if
lot
I'm
of,
saying that right or not.
yeah,
So
yeah. You can read accounts of other widows, or even, you know, hear, everybody knows a widow suddenly once you're a widow, right? So everybody comes over and tells you their widow story. So you hear a lot about the widows who found immense comfort from the Lord, or from their faith in that season, where it's like they felt closer to God than they'd ever felt before. And for me, I wouldn't even say it's the complete opposite. I would say I was in such an unfamiliar, terrifying place with God, because I had personally already experienced that closeness and that comfort from God in my life. We've gone through stuff, right? We had a relational journey. And so I think at that point with losing my husband, it was grappling with this part of God. You know, what's one of the biggest questions people have against the existence of God is like, why does he let bad things happen to good people, right? Or why do these awful things happen, that, you know, these tragedies? And it was not just asking that question, it was living the question and trying to understand this God of my youth, my paradigm, my worldview, and how I've been shaped does not fit my current reality and what I'm going through and what I'm living through. And the God that, this God who actually is the God in the scriptures that we read, is not afraid of facing these kinds of things. He's not actually, and this sounds very callous, but he's not affected like we are by mass tragedy and loss. I believe he's absolutely moved and he responds to that kind of tragedy, but it doesn't change. He's still resolutely God, if that makes sense. Yeah. It doesn't change his nature and his being. And he doesn't melt into a puddle when it happens. He's incredibly stable. I think about it a lot like a parent-child situation. When a child is having a meltdown, if the parent suddenly melts down with the child, we have a total catastrophe on our hands. Nobody's in control anymore, right?
Yeah, sure.
It's just a mess. And so I think in a lot of ways, I was learning this side of God who was a parent that didn't melt down with me, but allowed mine, right? There was permission and there was freedom for me to fully experience the meltdown. But there was a stabilizing thing in seeing this God who didn't crash and cave. And also it sounds blasphemous, but I wouldn't say God was tender with me during that time. There was a lot of silence. There was a lot of space for questions to hang in the air. Like I said, there's a lot of seeing this darker side of God, this side of God that comes in that, the whole earth trembles when he enters. And you're just like, I don't know if that sounds like a God that I really want to be close to, like it's not very approachable. We like to kind of hide around like the loving, happy Jesus
Yeah.
part of and there's this part of him that it's like he can look on a world that suffers and not look away. And I couldn't. I realized in my tiny world of tragedy, my small tragedy compared to global tragedy, right? I needed to break away from it. I needed to look away from it because it felt so consuming. It's like an abyss that never ends, and you'll just continue to fall. But knowing that there's this God who can stare it in the face and it doesn't destabilize him, that part just felt really terrifying of knowing that that's a reality of the nature of God.
Yeah.
And allowing my worldview to be rebuilt from there
Mhm.
was it was not something that was going to happen overnight, or by doing a nice devotional, or by
Sure.
just believing that my husband's in a better place, right? It was something that I feel like I really had to duke it out with God, and we really had to go to places that were dark and ask dark questions. And I probably made a lot of people uncomfortable around that time. Some of the things I would say or do. But I mean, when you're in something like that, you don't have the luxury, or at least I didn't, of filters and of not offending people.
Hmm. Yeah. We'll come back to some of that. Like, because one of the reasons I wanted to include grief as part of a series on the podcast, a podcast focused on doing life with people and relationships, is because I feel like, especially in American culture, we're getting better, but we don't really know how to grieve. And we don't know what it looks like. And we don't know how to come alongside people when they're grieving. It's almost like that person's untouchable now. I don't know what to
Yeah.
do. Right. So, one, I love hearing your journey, your arc, because like you said, you're sharing a story that I don't think people normally share. They share this often. The story that's shared publicly is God was very near to me. He was very close. He was very tender. He caught every tear. You know what I mean? But I think that people need to hear the other story where it's like, I allowed myself to face almost my darkest, deepest fears. I never imagined God could sit in this place and it's so dark. I think it's good for people to hear that reality and hear kind of what someone might be experiencing. It might not be that God who just is sitting with them, comforting, that kind of thing.
I
Um,
think in C.S. Lewis's book, he describes it as the door was slammed shut to heaven. Like, whoa, okay. Like,
yeah, yeah. Like, what do you do with that, right? And
what do you do that? Because that does happen,
mhm.
not always, because you've lost somebody, but I think we all kind of go through those experiences. And then what do you do with a God that doesn't fit the paradigm? He didn't heal. He didn't raise my
Right,
husband from the dead.
right.
And
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
supernatural grace to float above my circumstances. What do you do when it does feel like not only did he not catch you, he watched you fall?
Right. Right. I mean, and even that night for myself, I remember you texting me and saying, paramedics are on their way here. Will you please pray? And I lived a block away from a prayer room and I ran down there and I'm pacing in the back and I'm praying and I'm asking people to pray with me. I wasn't saying who it was or I don't know why. I just was like, it felt sacred and private for some reason. It was this weird, I don't know what's happening. And I remember in that moment being like, this is the moment God does something, right? And
Right.
then getting home and following up with you an hour later and you just being like, he's gone. And I was like, no, that's
Yeah.
not how this works. That's not what happens when you rally the troops and people pray.
Right.
This is
Right.
when you get the miracle, you know what I mean? And so yeah, so I'm curious. I know we talked about the U-shaped paradigm and we both have listened to this podcast by a man named Adam Young and I know he talks about it a lot on his podcast, but curious if you would take us through that a little bit because I feel like that deep darkness and facing it is that bottom of the U, right? That you chose to sit in and actually face.
Yeah.
So I'm curious how that plays into what you've seen as your way out of, not out, but because I agree with you, like that concept of you will always carry the loss is very real, but you know,
Yeah, I think yeah, I love that podcast. There were like moments throughout, I think, life and especially after losing Ramon that um
Mm-hmm.
really spoke to me. And I think that there was an episode on there and he was talking to somebody and I cannot remember who it was who actually came up with this originally, but it's this idea of a U diagram. Like if you were to draw a U on a piece of paper and the top left side of the U would be similar to um Jesus life, right? And then the bottom side of the bottom portion of the U is like the burial, the death of Jesus. And then the triumphal ending is the resurrection on the other side, on the right top side of the U. And this man was saying in the podcast that most of us, especially in the West, and coming from a Christian worldview, we want to go from one top of the U and skip right over to the other part of the U without ever visiting the deep middle, right? And to his point, though, there is no resurrection, though, without the death, right? Without fully settling in. And an example of Jesus, it's 3 days in the grave, right? It's not like his heart stopped beating for a few moments and then he just woke back up. This is a man who's like fully submersed. The death has happened, the burial's happened, all of this, like he's in the tomb.
Yeah.
We're beyond any hope. And letting yourself be in that place. For me, I think he gave words to a lived experience. I had one friend who was like, I appreciate that you're going through this and you're letting yourself actually go through a deep process of grief and really sitting in grief. And you're not trying to jump out of it and distract with like, I'm going to do something else next, or I'm going to get busy, or I'm going to go start dating, or I'm going to, there's so many things that you can busy yourself with and distract yourself when you're in grief. And I told her it's not a heroic thing. Like this is just where I am. I literally can do nothing else. And I told her I have to fully submit to this thing and pray that at some point God raises me from it, because I don't have the ability to come back from this. I just knew in my makeup, this kind of loss was so catastrophic for me that it was like, there's no coming out of this. Like, people say my husband died and I died that day too. And in many ways that was true for me, where it's like my everything, my dreams, my future, my hope, my life, my current status, everything died the day that he died. And I was willing to let myself slip into that abyss with this strange surety that God would pull me out. Like I couldn't claw or climb my way out of it, right? It's like I'm in the vortex, I'm in the abyss. There's no coming back from this. And I don't know what I'm actually going to be when I do. I have no control. It's a full relinquishing of all control, which for me, oh my gosh, that's like the worst thing that could happen, because I want to control everything. But it was also one of the most freeing, being fully submitted to the process and fully reliant on the fact that if he so chooses, he'll bring me back.
Yeah. And in that weird sense, though, God felt absent. And this is going to sound very cliche, but it's almost like he never left you, right? Because there was a part of you that had settled in, and you've used this phrase in talking to me in different points of my own journey, where you're like, just soften into it. What if you just lean into that and let it hurt? You kind of think you're like, I've surrendered to it, but also I've watched you go from almost like zombie, but internally kicking and screaming, to like exhale, where it was like, all right, this is where I'm at, and this is where I'll be until, and I think in that sense, it was this, God is foreign to me. I don't know who he is. He doesn't look like anything I've ever seen before, but I believe he's here. But I have no idea what this God will do. I have no idea.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I was never more sure of the reality of God. And at the same time, I was never more unsure of who God was. And that sounds
No, that sounds like a great description.
contradiction, but like
Yeah.
it was literally like, again, like I said, like I think It was almost like my worldview or my paradigm was like this glass cup. And when my husband died, that was smashed. Like that was over because in order to contain that experience and contain this new understanding of who God is, I needed a different vessel for it.
Sure.
And everything kind of had to be
Hmm.
rearranged.
Hmm. And you're really describing what some contemplative people would consider the first half of life and the second half of life. And so if you're listening right now and you've not really studied that concept, like I'll try to, I will also look up the U-shaped paradigm and figure out like where it came from and drop that in the notes. But this concept, Noelle is really describing this, like she spent her whole life with this one container of how she held her worldview and held God, and then that thing was just shattered and she had to rebuild it. If you're interested in learning more about that, like there is this concept of the first half of life and the second half of life where all of your answers don't work anymore and you're rediscovering who God is. And I wouldn't even say rediscover, you're discovering more about him, right? Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, so that's really beautiful. Um, I think like um da 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 da. So in all of this, coming out of the one more thing about the U-shaped paradigm, because you say like people want to go from one side to the other, and I think sometimes what we do, especially as Christians, is we look at that U shape and we go and we put a cross right in the middle, right? And I forget if Adam talks about this or not, but I was just like thinking about it, where we're like, oh, but Jesus died, so we guess just we have this bridge, and in some ways we do, but on the other hand of that, I think to myself, if I am to fellowship in his suffering and in his life.
Mhm.
This bottom part is part of his life and his suffering. If I'm to fellowship with him and be acquainted with him in all ways, and I'm to be molded and shaped to his character, I mean, I don't want to suffer, right? I don't want to be in this deep darkness, but
Yeah.
there's that choice to lean into it. And I don't think you were sitting there going, God, I mean, I know you're forming me into more of your image, but at the same time, I think like, I think um, there is something happening, right? Where you're getting acquainted with the Son of Man who suffered, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. There's another verse when it's talking about Jesus and it's saying like he's a man acquainted with grief. And
Mm,
acquainted, like we use that word to describe familiarity or even like a friend. And I remember going through that process and being like, it's it's not that Jesus knew a little bit about what it meant to suffer, like he embodied suffering.
wow.
Uh, and I think when you're going through catastrophic loss, there is an invitation to that side of the suffering Christ, right? There's an invitation into being able to look at that face and embody suffering. And I think that the beauty of that is realizing, and if there is a cross, right, it's realizing that the suffering will not kill you. Like the
Hmm.
suffering will not take it. It literally cannot snatch what makes you you.
Hmm.
If anything, the suffering solidifies what really is there. It's like a furnace with gold, right? Like everything else is burned off, and what remains is what's true. And so I think that it's a refining process. It's not like I felt like, oh, I'm being so changed, through this process, and I'm going to be such a great person on the other side of it. It was more of everything that is superficial or unnecessary to actually going through this experience is going to literally be burned off. And whatever is left, that is what is true, right? Like that is what remains, and what is needed to actually move on the other side of this.
Hmm. Hmm. That's really good. That's really good. I want to transition a little bit in our convo to talking about what your experience was as a widow, as a young widow. And your experience is obviously very, very, very unique because you lost Ramon and then like 10 months later, COVID happened, right? Or like less than a year later, COVID started.
It's almost exactly a year to the date.
Yeah. And you also were still in a season where you hadn't gone back to work. Like you were a stay-home mom at the time. You were doing Pilates, but you had taken a break from teaching in a studio. So you were in a very unique
Yeah.
situation where you were kind of already in an more of an isolated season and then insert catastrophic loss and then a pandemic, right? And so I know that like your responses or experience might be a little different than someone who has a catastrophic loss today because the pandemic is Lord willing, coming again. Like, you know, and so like, geez, new fears unlocked, right? But I'm curious what you found was helpful in that time. I remember being with you and one time bringing you what is our one of our shared favorite meals, dan noodles and dumplings. And I remember being like, okay, maybe I can get her to eat. Like, I'll bring her dan noodles. Like seriously, because I know you were not eating. You were like, and I walk in and you look at it, and I think you opened the box, and I think you had a visceral reaction to the smell, and then you like walked away, and I was like, all right, she's not eating the dan noodles. Got it. Like it's like it's like so I know that at that time in that moment, nothing felt very helpful, but I'm curious looking back, what you found was helpful. So I'll let you respond to that. And I also want to make a comment. I remember the first time you went back to church and you talked to somebody at church and you came up to me after and you're like, I think I made him pee his pants. You were just like, I think I terrified him because you were so honest with what was going on inside of you, right? Um, anyway, so those are two random like that
Yeah,
was
I think
a little
I
tangent,
think
but
when you're in grief and you make those first appearances, right? It's so funny because it's like it's so charged. It's the elephant in the room. Everybody knows. Everybody knows what happened, and um, and they know you're not okay, but they want you to be okay, and so they're gonna ask you how you're really doing.
not just how you're doing, how you're really doing. How are you
How are
really
you really doing, right? And I don't know. I just didn't really have a filter. And so I was just like, this is where I'm at. Like, let me just, you want to know, I'll share. And so yeah, I think that poor guy was just like, oh, this is not what I signed up for this Sunday morning. Like somebody else help me. And I think when you're in that state of grief and loss, it's very destabilizing because it's a mirror. It's a mirror to everyone because we all know it's like we're all going to walk through some sort of loss and possibly tragedy at some point in our lives. And we don't know, we're not prepared. We don't know how to do that well. And we're also really, really uncomfortable with people being sad. Like we want the good report. We want it. We want the, I joke again, like another Bible example, but like we all want the Jesus triumphal entry. We do not like the one that's like, well, he's being killed and buried. Like that's just not good times for us, right? Like we want to skip over that. So we go from like one triumph to the resurrection, and nobody wants to sit in the 3 days where it's completely still and quiet and there's nothing happening. And so I think that's just an uncomfortable reality that we need to get better. And I think part of what you were asking is like what felt helpful. Yeah, I mean, nothing feels helpful. Everybody wants to feed you and you're not eating, or like you're just like everything tastes like cardboard and ashes. Like nothing tastes good. And they all want to cheer you up and they want to talk about like, nice life things and what's your little boy doing, and like they want to connect with you in a happy place because it in all honesty it gives the other person comfort, right? It doesn't necessarily comfort you, but if they can see you smile or they can see you eat or they can see you, make some sort of nod to progress, it makes them feel like, oh, okay, she's going to be okay. Like we don't have to worry. She ate today, guys. Like, we are incrementally getting better every day. And the problem with grief is that it's just a tangled, messy web. There is no increment. There are no stairs. There are no steps. There are no actual stages. It is a true process of just really metabolizing of it just becoming part of you. So I think some of the things that were most helpful were people that could just sit with me. Mm-hmm. Like that was the most helpful. I had no words. I couldn't even say that my husband died. Like I couldn't actually say that phrase until months after he died. I couldn't express to people what I needed because I didn't know. I couldn't ask for help because I didn't want to have to guide somebody through helping me, right? Like it's, maybe I needed a sprinkler fixed or I needed, whatever, then there was a more burden put on me to facilitate, well, when can you come and what time can you be there? And, all the things that would kind of come in that process. And so I call it like blanket pillow forting. And I just built my little pillow fort and I just dove in. But the people that could come into my fort with me, that was probably the most healing, is the people that were not uncomfortable by my silence or were not there to try to entertain me or do a little song and dance or ignore the elephant in the room or focus solely on the elephant. They were just there to sit with me. And that was very, very healing in the process. And not everybody could come and physically sit with me on my couch, but there were people that would do that. I mean, you were a friend like that, where it's just, you very quickly learn the people that are going to be committed to you for the long haul in a process like this. And the ones that are there for the moment, because tragedy attracts people like crazy. Like, people come out of left field that you didn't even know would be there. And they all want to say their thing and they all want to say their piece. And I get that, but everybody's texting you, everybody's calling, everybody's leaving cards, everybody's leaving notes. And my thing was, I'm always a prove it person. Like, again, for better or worse, that's just like part of my personality, is like, prove it, like, prove that you're going to be there. And the people that would just continue. I mean, I had a friend that came kind of out of the woodworks through this whole thing, and she would just continually be a constant person that was like, I will call you, I will follow up with you, let's meet up. And it was months after, I mean, years after. It's people that never got tired of the process, right? Like, some people are just like, are you done yet? Like, are you over it? Are we done being sad? Can we move on with our lives? And there were times where it's like, I'm stuck on this one part and I really need somebody to sit with me or to hear this part of what I'm trying to integrate into who I am. And that was the most healing. It's not necessarily what anybody said or did, or not what they said or like what they brought or the meal train, but it was like literally just come and be with me. And be part of it.
No, that's good. I remember after Ramon's memorial, which was like a month after, couple months, no, 2 months after, like May, was it in May, I think?
The memorial?
Mm-hmm.
No, the memorial was, it was only like 2 weeks after, so it was in
Oh,
April.
really? Gosh, that felt like a very long 2 weeks. Um,
Everybody felt that way.
yeah, it felt so, no, not saying like it needed to happen faster, just saying
No,
like it was such a like time stood still moment. And I remember like, because you guys as a couple, like I was close to you, we were good friends, and then Ramon came along not long after we became friends. And so it was like kind of like we were in a group text, we were texting like every other day. And I remember this moment, the day of the memorial, and I'd seen you like a couple times at least before the memorial. We'd been like kind of been talking, but like you said, cards, text messages, phone, like Randy had your phone, your brother had your phone for like days, and Nicole had your phone, and like because it was just too much. But I remember after the memorial, I was meant to send something to you that would have been just like a normal message I would have sent to you pre-tragedy. And I hesitated. And then I had this moment where I was like, no, this is my friend. I'm going to choose right now to be the same friend. I'm going to be sensitive. I know that I'm going to make mistakes, like giving myself permission to make mistakes. And we did have like a couple conversations where you had to tell me, like, Teresa, like, I honestly, that response kind of hurt. And I was like, oh, tell me why. You gave me permission to ask those questions. And so I think we both gave ourselves permission to figure it out, right? And I think that was a really unique thing. I was super grateful. But also I really distinctly remember like, okay, this is my friend. I'm making a choice and I'm gonna reach out, and if she needs space, she'll take space, but I'm not gonna give her space. Meaning I'm not gonna be like, you're untouchable, which I think is what people do. Like they don't know what to do, so the person's a little bit untouchable, you know?
Yeah, I think it's a very uncomfortable situation. You don't know what to do. You're
Right.
very awkward, you're clumsy, or you're not going to say the right thing. Everybody's afraid of saying, like, setting the person off. Look, we're already sad. You
Yeah.
can't say anything that's going to make the sadness work. Well, maybe you could, but like, but for them, like the people that are well intentioned, they're probably not going to say anything that's going to make us more sad.
Right.
But I think, yeah, I think to me, I think the biggest thing is somebody who sees this you're there in the moment of the tragedy, but you're also going to say like, I'm committing to you a long time out, like 6 months, 8 months, a year, 2 years out, 3 years out. We're talking long haul. Like that kind of loss doesn't go away after the year anniversary. It's not like we're suddenly okay and we're fine again. It literally becomes a part of you. And so I think one of the best gifts that you could give somebody is the gift of really longevity. Like, can you run that course with them?
Mm-hmm.
And it's okay if you can't. There's other people that can do it. But I think one of the biggest gifts that you could give somebody going through that kind of loss is just like giving yourself permission to say, like, I'm going to mess it up.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm going to do it perfectly, but I'm going to keep showing up. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's probably one of the best things that you can do is just keep showing up. There were plenty of times I probably didn't respond to your text.
Sure.
Or it was like a one word,
Yeah.
Instead of taking that personally and being like, oh, she doesn't want to talk to me.
Mm-hmm.
It's saying like, okay, I'm going to show up again tomorrow, or I'm going to check in 6 weeks, or I'm going to check in and whatever. And those people were the ones that, it was a very helpful thing to know. Okay. They're actually here for as long as I need.
Right. And it's like the loss is set in a certain environment, right? And that includes your personality, that includes your life circumstance, that includes the type of loss that it was. And because we were good friends before, I knew some of your tells, right? I remember one night you called me and I could tell, I was like, she shouldn't be alone right now, but she's not going to ask me to come over, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember being on the phone with you and just getting in my car and driving to your house. And you were like, oh, oh. And I could tell you were like, surprised I was there, but relieved, but not but also kind of like, did I need this? And then like being like, yeah, I probably needed this, you know? And that comes from the pre-existing friendship that we had, right? So there's so much baked into the cake, right? I know I'm like looking at the time. I know you only have a few minutes before you gotta go pick up Ash. But I am curious. There's some phrases that people use that I think are unhelpful, right? Phrases like, God will work this out for good. He's in a better place. Sometimes even the phrase, how are you? Or like, let me know what I can do to help you. Cause like, and you address some of those like throughout our conversation. Um, but I'm curious if you were in ground zero right now, what do you wish I knew? Right. Like knowing what you know now, if you could give me tips for how to help you at ground zero,
Yeah.
what would it be?
I think the biggest thing is the person grieving is already tremendously burdened. The emotional and the mental burden that you carry is wild. And so I would say, like, doing the most to unburden. If you feel like, oh, I want to see if maybe she wants her lawn done, just go do it. Just go do it. Like, maybe the trash needs to be taken out, just go do it. Like, don't sit there and try to be like, well, I don't want to bother her and I want to make sure that it's planned and da da da. If you want to drop something off, but don't involve them as much as needed, right? I don't know if this is helpful, but there's a woman that I met out here who lost her husband very suddenly. And I put together a little basket, like a comfort basket, right? Comfort kit kind of thing. Some of the books that were really meaningful to me when I first lost my husband, that type of thing. And I texted her and I was like, hey, please don't respond to this text unless like you need to. But I got some stuff for you. I'm going to drop it off at your house. I'm going to be there on Wednesday at this time. You don't even need to answer the door. I just wanted you to know, so you're not creeped out that there's somebody on your porch, right? Like, just obviously you don't want to freak people out. So I did that. I didn't hear back from her right away, but I think it was a week or so afterwards, she texted me and she was like, I can't tell you. She's like, your gift was really sweet. Thank you so much for bringing that. She's like, but honestly, the biggest gift was your text message and just relieving me from the burden of having to have a conversation that I really wasn't sure I wanted to have.
Yeah.
Or seeing somebody or forcing that person to engage and set a date, like, or figure things out. And so I think that was something that I was just like, going through that process, just trying to, I think, thinking of ways like, how can you unburden the person the most and do it in a way that is truly purely for their benefit. Like, if you want to give them a meal, just drop it off, or give them gift cards for DoorDash or whatever. Make it as simple as possible. And I'm not saying everybody's grief is different. So some people may want to see the face and they may want to have the conversations all day long, and they want that train coming over and over and over. And they just want to be surrounded and they just want to talk. It's a very different experience than what I had. For me, it was like, I can't have a conversation. Like, and it feels, and I'm very much the type of person that like, I want to stabilize the people in the room because then I feel stabilized. And when I know people are coming and I'm in a vulnerable place, I'm not able to do that role. And then I can sense people's instability. And that really sets me off. And it makes me feel like, oh, I'm more, burdened in the process. So I think just unburdening, like, what can you do? It's really simple things. Hire a maid, right? Like, have somebody go and pick up their laundry. There's so many things that you can do that, send them a gift certificate for a massage. There are lots of different things that you can do that can help unburden, and it doesn't require a whole lot. It's not like a taxing conversation on that person.
That's great. And I think even the unburdened part, like, it's how are you demonstrating care without asking them to give you anything, right? Because they don't have anything to give, right? And so whether that be a response or a communication or their own like emotional support for you, because whatever loss you've experienced as well in the process. I remember like one big thing for you is being like, I can't help the people around me grieve Ramon. I'm grieving Ramon. I can't alleviate their suffering. So I think the powerful thing about your text message is you gave that woman permission. If she wanted to engage in a conversation with you, she could. Like if she was the type of person that was grieving and wanted her house full of people, she could have been like, awesome. I'll see you there. I'll open my door. Please come in. You gave her permission to engage or not engage. And I think even that in itself is like a type of unburdening, right? So,
and I would say too, like, don't do obviously like everybody has different capacity, but if at all possible, don't do a one and done. Like the person who has just lost somebody is going to be inundated with one and done. They're going to get the cards. They're going to get the flowers. I hated flowers, honestly. That was like the worst thing you could send me because I was like, great, now I have another thing in my house that's going to die in a couple of days and I have to deal with it. And it was, I mean, that's just like say it's a morbid part of loss, but it was just another thing that I was like, ugh, like these stupid flowers. And also, this is a side note, but can we just talk about like funeral arrangements? There's hideous, like they are the ugliest flowers that you've ever seen. So, people are trying to do the thing that they think they're supposed to do. But I think just there's a lot of that like instant, pouring out of sympathy and grief and empathy, but there's not a lot of it that's consistently running with that person. So if at all possible, show up and then be consistent.
That's great. That's really good wisdom. Well, I know you have to run and get your little guy. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing your life. I know this is a different way. You've shared it in pieces, but this is a different kind of platform. So just thank you for being vulnerable and for doing that. Yeah.
I hope that's helpful.
It was super helpful. I always learn from you and from your experience, and I'm just grateful for your friendship. I know we'll have another conversation at some point, later today, probably. All right. Yeah, voice memo me. Yeah. Okay. Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.